I'm sitting in a corridor deliberately because this is a chapter about a rite of passage, moving on through the world, learning what the world was like from a very isolated village in Gumbalting, learning how to cope on my own, and learning the facts of life. We were on holiday and things hadn't gone well, but once we arrived, from then on, things seemed as if they were going very well indeed. Gwendy stopped being sick, and Mum loved being with her brother and Auntie Gladys, and us girls loved being with our three cousins. They were gorgeous. There was Rosemary, then Heather, and then baby Bryony. They were all named after flowers, and you could tell why. They were so pretty. "My little posy," said Auntie Gladys, as she put her arms round them, hugged them together, and they smiled shyly and nodded their little heads. Us three sisters loved playing with them and looking after them and taking them on long walks, and Auntie Gladys packed some proper picnics, not like ours where we had to go to a shop for a bottle of pop and a bag of crisps. This was a proper picnic basket, and we had tinned salmon in our sandwiches. I'd never had them before. If Mum made us sandwiches, it was mashed boiled egg. So we loved being there. And another thing I loved was going down the fields on my own to watch the boats. Across the water there were lots of boats going up and down with red flapping sails, and they often smiled at me. And there was a man in the garden opposite, and he used to smile cheerily as well as he did his garden. Everybody was so friendly at this holiday place in Norfolk. But one day, Mum wanted to go shopping in the nearby town, and Katie and Gwendy wanted to go as well, but I didn't want to go, so I stayed with my three little cousins, and I decided to go for a walk with Rosemary, Heather, and Bryony, and they were very excited. And Auntie Gladys packed us one of her posh picnics, and she put it in a basket, and I set off with my little cousins, all very excited, and we went towards the river. The sky was as blue as it could be, and there was only one boat going past, and we stood watching the big red sails swishing and flapping and turning to catch the breeze. We saw the woman sailing and waved, but she didn't see us. We all sat on the bank to eat our picnic. It was lovely. Auntie Gladys had packed us all sorts of things, biscuit and cake, as well as the salmon sammies. Then we went to pick some flowers for Auntie Gladys as a thank you for being so kind. I looked up and saw my man across the river. He wasn't gardening now, he was just watching me. And this time he took his shirt off. It was a very hot day, so I expect he'd been busy gardening and got too warm. He waved at me, and I waved back, and my little cousins laughed and nodded their heads and carried on picking wildflowers. We would have a lovely bunch to take back to Auntie Gladys. Then I looked up again, and my friendly man was there waving. But this time he hadn't got his trousers on. Well, he had, but they were down at his ankles. I couldn't believe it. Was it that hot? And do you know, I could see everything he had. "Call it front bottom," said my mam. She always said that, but it was not like any front bottom I'd ever seen. I stared frozen to the ground in disbelief, and I heard the reeds sniggering. What could I do. He was smiling at me, and he started to move forward. He started to make a noise as well, as if he'd been running for a long time, but he'd only been standing there in his garden looking at me. He moved forward again and went into the water, and I knew that he was coming for me, and maybe even get my little girl cousins as well. For some reason, it was then that I suddenly heard in my head Charlie's loud snigger when he knew Miss Grey was getting married, and I knew then that he was laughing about this. This awful thing that was going to happen was what Charlie had been laughing about. I had to do something. I looked round for the lady in the boat with the red sails, but she had gone and disappeared upriver. There was nobody. I was alone. "Quick!" I shouted to my cousins. "Quick! Get everything in the basket and then run!" "Why?" shouted Rosemary. "Hurry! Quick!" I gave them a push. "It's going to rain!" I shouted, looking into a blue sky that did suddenly seem threatening, but not from rain. "Please, please," I cried inside myself. I just didn't want the man to catch up with me, get across that river and get to me. I turned round only once, and he was still there, waving everything, and still moving through that water. I didn't look back again. We ran on and on, through the field after field. Going back seemed much longer than when we had come. It seemed to go on forever, that run, but it didn't, of course. And at last we burst into Auntie Gladys's house. She was very surprised to see us so early. "We thought it was going to rain," sobbed Rosemary. And Auntie Gladys looked up into that blue sky, but she didn't say anything. She gave us all a drink, and I went up to bed. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was too scared to go down to the river ever again, or to talk to anybody about what had happened. I just couldn't risk it. I couldn't tell anybody because I was too frightened about what else might happen. Something really awful had happened this time across the river. It wasn't just like when I was on the wrong side of the drain, and it wasn't just like when Gwendy was sick, crossing the Humber and going in the car. This felt much worse, and I knew now that there was something in the grown-up world that I didn't understand. I didn't like it, but I couldn't do anything about it. I wanted to go home, and I wanted our holiday to end. Dad couldn't wait to go home either, and after 7 days he was in the car revving the engine, and I was in there too. We shouted our goodbyes, and our little car set off on its journey up to King's Lynn and then back to the Humber. Field after field disappeared, and we seemed to get on our way much faster than when we had come. We were soon there at the paddle steamer on the Humber, which was ready to take us home. Even our Gwendy was not sick on the ferry, and soon we were on the Yorkshire side, and the car was speeding on. East, west, home's best. When school started again, I was glad that I had gone up a class, so I wouldn't be able to be with Mrs. Grey now that she was married. I knew now what Charlie had been sniggering about, and I didn't think that it was very funny. In fact, I bet Mrs. Grey didn't think it was funny either when she saw on her wedding night what I had seen across the water.